All right, Jamie, ex-CISO Allianz here in London in a cab. Black cab.
The black cab.
It's wild, man. Look at us sitting around here. Got our LED lights. We have people everywhere. They're not looking at us yet, but they will.
They will. They will.
How's everything going, man?
It's really good. And so I guess this is CISO in cabs, rather.
This is CISO in cabs. Well, I was thinking it's like I could potentially drive, which I did do, but it's like if it's in the middle of nowhere, but driving in the middle of the city is just, and this is a little flash cloud, you know, you gotta go in and iconic. And I mean, that's the big thing, right? Wherever you're going, you know, you have to use a little bit of that own energy here in what we're doing. The vibe of the place needs to come out, which is kind of cool. But tell me, you know, how have things been going with you, you know?
Yeah, they're good, thank you. It's, I mean, it's a busy start to the year, right? So I former CISO of Allianz from back end of January, and I spent the last 5-6 months just talking, getting out, meeting people, and learning about things that you just didn't know existed. Right?
That's
the technology using startups, just amazing.
I think like the startup journey from there to here, I mean, sometimes you don't get to see that as much, right?
No.
And now, you know, with one of these things, sometimes this happens, but you know, with these kinds of things, there's always so much of a learning experience that even you get to go through now, that you're no longer in a bigger company, right? Because you get to work with all these different newer organizations and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I tend to think of it that the things I've learned in the last 6 months, if I'd have known for the last 6 years, I could have done a much better job.
Really?
You just don't get time to put your head up and look around. You just, right, we've got this problem.
But maybe it's not your fault, right? Sometimes it's the opportunity cost as well. Like, for example, if I'm sitting with you now, technically speaking, at your old job, we may not have met.
No.
Right? Because you may not have been plugged in or someone hasn't introduced you, but now that we know each other, it's like obviously you're going to be very close to whatever we do and very close to what other people do too, which is one of the big things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you're right. If it had been in my old job, then maybe I'd have come to a dinner. Maybe I'd have come to an info set.
Exactly.
Something would have come up, right?
Maybe. But that's good that you got the opportunity. So with this period of time, you basically have taken this time to step back and start thinking about really what are the core, things that have been built around, or how things are built, or what's like your biggest thing that you've learned?
I think the thing I've been focusing on the most is enjoying it. I think the people in cyber just love it, right? They're passionate. I mean, like yourself, for example, so excited about it. But taking the time to talk and understand the people and the tech is just, that's what I've enjoyed. I've done it for 20 odd years, and you can get very hung up on corporate, enterprise, career moves, versus let's just go and look at how much fun and excitement there is in this industry. So I think the biggest thing I've learned, as I probably already said, is the things out there that you can't get access to at a big enterprise from startups and new vendors are going to be game changing in 5 years' time.
That's fair.
You're just in that holding, like you can see it,
you
just
see
can't
it,
quite use it.
It's so fair, because the thing is that when we're doing what we're doing, a lot of the reasons why startups get built is because, hey, somebody identifies a problem. Now, obviously, the more successful ones, they identify a problem that is widespread, that's mainstream, and so on and so forth. But if you identify something like that, that doesn't mean that you're aware of it, right? No. You may not be aware of that challenge because you're not seeing it at that 1,000 company scale or something like that.
Yeah, and you're seeing it from specific lenses. So if you're not on the Gartner lens, perhaps, I'm probably not going to see it.
Yeah, I mean, even at the Gartner lens, right? It's like you're still talking to a lot of customers, you're still seeing a lot of vendors, which is one of the pros of what they do, right? Yeah. And so do you see like that there's a big, at least starting to have a shift in that direction here in the UK? Because I mean, basically when you were at Allianz, even though it's a big company, you didn't get the chance to do this.
No, I think you see, if I want to procure something in any company I've been at in the last 10 years, you go to procurement, and procurement will help you understand who you're going to buy from.
Oh, really?
You don't go to them and say, hey, here's 5 really cool guys I've met with some great tech.
But do you think you'd be able to do that now?
I think that once those companies grow to a certain point, then they get to play. But I think it's getting the whole machine of a big company to understand, just because I've fallen in love with it and I specialize in the tech and I get it, why would the person in procurement?
But then like, how do you recommend, well, I mean, it's not really talking from my own perspective, but if you were sitting there and you wanted someone to look at these technologies and also consider, the latest and greatest, what would you say?
In a big enterprise?
Yeah. Is it even possible?
I mean, it's possible because going back to that point, people love this, right? Passion.
Yeah.
So if you've got a CISO in a big enterprise that's not excited by some of this, I mean, that's a real shame.
But you're at least able to go into a procurement team and say, hey, by the way, you should be taking a look at this.
You're able to, but you're going to have a hard job when it comes to benchmarking with a Gartner or a McKinsey, when it comes to, existing customer bases, all of the checks you go through. Like, there are natural, I think about it in two ways. There's quite high barriers to entry in cyber. There's one for the people coming in, and I think there's two for the tech coming in.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you get that right deal, and then the rest of it opens up. And that's what I meant by 5 years down the road. You sort of sat thinking, that thing looks really cool that's coming my way.
But I can't even
look at years off being able to procure it.
But now do you think, like, if you went back into, call it Allianz or wherever, do you think that would change? That conversation has changed now?
Definitely. I think people are becoming, especially with cost, right? I mean, cost is such an important factor now. It's hard to justify we're just going to have all the old things we've always had if something can do it better and cheaper.
That's fair. I mean, I think, like, what's interesting is that there's definitely, like, a more acceptance, a gradual acceptance of, like, even considering a new company that hasn't been around for 10 years, right? Versus maybe 5 years ago, it's like, unless you're, a brand name company, not even a brand name, it's just something that's been around for a while. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I think your hand's almost forced to a degree now as well, because there's so many new threats and things you've got to fix that not necessarily some of the existing tech can. So if you're not looking at new players, you're just accepting a risk. Or you're convincing yourself you fixed it when you perhaps haven't. So
do you think that there's some big changes? Because I mean, sometimes when I look at it from a startup lens, I think it's like these things, they tackle such a particularly tiny problem that it may not really be as relevant for you. It may not be on, like, the top of your laundry list.
I think it's true that they can be quite niche, but I think my biggest bugbear in cyber is that not all tools, but a lot of tools do what the other tools do.
Yeah.
And differentiating between, well, this one really does, look, if it just does that, it's almost easier to consume because you go, well, I haven't got that, so I can buy one of those. But you might have 3 other tools that claim they can each do a bit of it and they don't. That's
the
hard.
Anti-platformization strategy here by Jamie. You're like, everyone's like, yeah, we love platforms, and you're like, dude, this is.
I didn't say it worked, but I think when something's really laser focused on one problem, it's much easier to go, well, I've got to have a bit of that, right? Because no one else is doing that particular type of encryption or whatever it is, right? So
it's not bad, because when we, one of my first bosses at Symantec, actually, well, the first boss, his name is Gary, so he knew everything backwards and forwards. He's retired now. We worked together for like years and years. And one thing he used to say is like, the problem, Kunal, is that the focus. Even as a product team, imagine you're a company that has 20 different capabilities and products and this and that. They're not integrated. Like, you now have to have teams that support each one of those. Versus if you're specifically focused on one thing, you'll always be able to be more successful. Like the difference between an Okta and what used to be like a Symantec IAM product. Like, you never even heard of that before. But an Okta, everyone's heard of the household name because they're only focused on that.
Yeah, 100%. I think the cost of overhead of those tools as well, it seems on face value that it's going to be easier because you've got one product.
Yeah.
But actually, you've got one product that's really 7 products.
Yeah.
So whether you'd have bought it from 7 people or 1, I think that's not to say there aren't exceptions where you do get that value from having one. But it's not often the dream you imagine it's going to be, right?
Right.
Like Microsoft is
they may not like really. It's just it's not the best.
Yeah, I was going to use Microsoft as probably an unfair example, but they've got some brilliant security controls, but they are each independent controls, and it still takes the teams behind to be able to operate and consume and manage them. You can't just go, well, I've got one provider, so I've got massive efficiencies.
But then, what's on your wish list? What's number 1 on your wish list from a vendor or out there? Like, if you're like, hey, I consume your technology today, what would I want you to do differently?
I think the number 1 thing on my wish list is, and this is probably not,
it doesn't have to be
fair to put it on the
vendors,
vendors,
fine.
right?
You should,
but I'm gonna
put it on there.
I think the number 1 thing on my wish list is the more you do in the red teaming space, and the more you find real problems, what you realize is that you've got tools that can detect things, and you've got tools that can do automated behaviors on the back of detection. So we've seen something happen, let's take a preventative step, and it's getting really clever. Like, you almost don't need to be involved these days. But what I see very few tools doing is coming in and going, actually, if you made these changes over here, you need that detection, so don't get me wrong. But you wouldn't have any alerts from us. because there's so many fundamental misconfigurations in your infrastructure, your apps, your Active Directory, your network.
Yeah.
That then you've had to buy these tools to make sure you can detect
But
all
this
of
is
that.
you know, it's
But the vendors don't want to fix that, right? Because
no. It's not that they don't want to. What I think is that, in fact, I was with my friend. He's the CISO of Archaea, Travis. So Travis, I was with him. I'm like, you know, Travis, the thing that you should always point to is it's a product management problem. 99 times out of 100, everything that someone is saying, it's usually a PM problem. Because what you're saying is you're like, yo, I basically have a bunch of alerts in a way, or let's just something, incidents, alerts, whatever you want to call it, violations. And out of those violations or alerts or whatever, this product capability is just telling me that these exist, which is it's not fundamentally incorrect. Maybe it's noise, maybe it's not noise, but it would be nice if somebody focused on how do I get those down lower by maybe making an additional source or maybe making it easier for me to figure out why those are coming. Like DLP is a great example.
Yes. Well, yeah.
Thousands of violations a day. Half of them are false positives. Maybe if you made your product a little better, then that wouldn't happen.
Yeah, I think you probably summed it up nicely, which is that if there was something that came along and said, I'm going to take all of those logs and those alerts, and I could tell you what the root cause is.
Yeah.
Now, you can't get rid of those products because of it, because something's going to happen somewhere. You wish you had one of those.
Right.
But I'd rather have a lot less noise from them because I found the problem and I fixed it, rather than relying on the tool. It's a bit back to
the reason why I say it's a PM problem is because I don't think that somebody is genuinely trying to not solve that problem. They see, oh yeah, customers complain about this all the time, but the way in which they solve it is incorrect. I'll give you an example, right? Like in DLP, one of the biggest things is like, oh, how do we find the needle in the haystack? But instead of thinking like that, what if we rethought about the problem and saying, hey, let's just make sure there's not a lot of hay. Let's make sure there's not a lot of false positives. Let's make sure that there's not fundamentally there. And it's possible. It's not impossible to do that. You just have to build the core technology better, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what is always going to be about rethinking how something is done. I mean, best example, is hey, like we're taking a taxi. This is an electric taxi, but if we think about it 10 years ago, people would be like, it's not impossible.
Yeah, there's still a few of those today.
Yeah, impossible. But
can't work.
there is always a mechanism of doing something. I mean, even what we're doing, right? In Dope's like, hey, it's operating on the laptop.
Yeah, I think with the DLP point comes back to that trade-off between enabling a business to operate securely and causing it to not operate.
Yeah,
there's got to be a balance, right? Because
exactly.
99% of the times, even the false positive is like, it's not through malicious intent. Like, it's just noise that you've got to filter out.
Exactly.
You don't want to miss that 0.1. That's the
yeah. And that's where, like, I always believe that, hey, the problems that somebody sees as a consumer, as a customer, there is a way of fixing them a lot of times, right? Like, I mean, something as simple as, hey, like, what is the biggest issue you've ever seen? Or what's an annoying issue you used to find in your life?
The volume of logs.
Yeah.
It is, you've got the problems, you've got to buy the tools, they help fix the problems, but then you've got to have a team that can consume all of the logs and the noise and the alerts, and you just move the problem some degree around the table.
But maybe that's the thing, is like the ask is, if you're a technology that we're ingesting the logs from, let's make the logs more relevant, right?
Yeah.
Or let's at least give you a capability of making them more relevant so that somebody isn't getting inundated with the wrong stuff, right?
And also having that team that consumes those logs, part of that team's got to be going back and saying, what's the root cause? So what does it make less hay? It's within your gift as CISO to go, right, well, we don't have to just accept there's a load of logs.
Yeah,
we can look at why there's a load of logs, right? Especially when you're paying per log. So then people start to filter stuff out rather than going right back to the core.
But, and that, I think, is an understanding gap sometimes, because when you tell me that, like, now I've gotten to learn a little bit better, but technically speaking, I've never implemented and gone in and build a cybersecurity program around a SIM before. I've never done that before. I can say that, oh, this one exists and it's there, but how am I really supposed to be the right person to say, hey, this is good, this is bad? But I think maybe that's the right reason why we're here, right? It's because then you can tell me, hey, this is the reason why it's a problem. It's because if you're sending me every single thing known to mankind into my SIM, it's costing me a lot of money.
I think sometimes having not done it is the reason you're doing it. Because if you've done it, you wouldn't do it again.
Well, a great example was like, when we started our SIM integration, right? Like, integration goes in, you pull the data, and once upon a time, this would be a custom API. The challenge is that you have a custom API to do this. Every single SIM, everyone uses a different SIM, right?
Yep.
Not was a consistent. Now you have to build a separate connector, right, for each thing. That becomes problematic.
Yeah.
And so instead we use S3 bucket connector, so it just pulls in and it works every time.
Yeah.
So there's small things like you can do, or for example, like someone like yourself once said, hey, instead of using a CSV format, use a JSON log format, which for the individual engineer made a huge world of difference. But for us, we're like, oh, okay, that's like a fair point. We should use that. But you're not really aware of it, right?
No, and you'll get 20 different opinions on whether that's right. Like, there's another way, or everyone's got a view, right?
But then I think that's where the feedback is so helpful.
Yeah.
So maybe you should continue to push your technology partners to like just do what
just giving feedback. I think with building a big SIEM product or a big cybersecurity project and program, that's a real challenge that people experience. But I think I always say, like, if I go into an interview for a job and people ask questions like, how do you stay current? How do you stay relevant? How do you keep up with trends in the market? And to a degree, you don't, right? I mean, you do because you're in it every day.
Yeah.
But like I just said at the beginning of this journey, I wasn't coming out and talking to you and looking at new tech. So you do enough to keep up with the bits there are problems.
You must be pretty happy about this then, right? Because you're like seeing all these new technologies.
Now I could do this all day, like just drive around, have a chat. But I always say interview if it's a bit like having a build around. So if I know I want an extension on the back of my house and I wanted to have some windows and a wall there, someone will turn up and go, "Ooh, that's a bit tricky. You can't have one of those. You can't have that." Now I know enough to be able to go, "Come on, yeah, you can." But you should never let me lay a brick. And I always think about that, like with a SIEM or a SOC, or I know enough to run them and operate them and be accountable for them. But you should never let me log into a tool or configure use cases or look at the outputs, because that's a really specialist skill. That's a real.
But I think that's where like cybersecurity is an ecosystem, right? It's not just one technology to rule them all. There's a lot of different things that come together. There's people, there's like these processes you were talking about. So like, what would be like when you go into an organization, which you will, I'm sure eventually, but you'll go into a company and what would be the first like order of business, let's call it?
The thing I spent a lot of time looking at recently is whether I would build my teams in the same way as I have done this.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of skills. I mean, you read on LinkedIn, right? There's a massive skill gap. Yeah. Really hard to get into cyber.
Is that like real?
I mean,
sometimes they say that, but I feel like they're just trying to sell some education technology.
It's a whole nother drive, but there are definitely parts where it's real. But I also think you'll be seeing, I'm sure, the amount of. I just shook hands with someone before we got in this car who's a former CISO somewhere. Yeah. There are a lot of former CISOs out there now. So there's a lot of very skilled people who aren't in roles, and there's potentially a lot of ability for people to transfer it into cyber that haven't transferred in. Yeah. And I think that's because we set that barrier to entry. I touched on it about 20 minutes ago. The entry barriers to cyber are just too high. Like some jobs, if you're building a SOC, if you're dealing with incidents, you need to know what you're doing. Yeah. But there are lots of transferable skills from IT, risk, compliance, audit, IT, like the business even. Right. And knowing and understanding. If you want to solve the DLP problem, who's better than someone who works in the business?
Who understands what the business part
why
is.
They send that file.
So do you feel like you're gonna try to pull people or bring people from other parts of the organization? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think bringing people in from within the organization. I mean, for years there's been this concept of security champions within businesses. Yeah. I think you see it more commonplace now. You have a business ISO, so sort of a CISO targets a particular business unit. But I also think I'd look at how much you insource versus you outsource. So you buy an amazing bit of tech, and then you build this team to run it. And you think, well, why not get that amazing company build that tech with their MSP to run it, rather than trying to have that hybrid model of both. Got it. And I think most teams I've seen over the years are 50, 70 people plus internally, really big companies.
Yeah, because your company was quite large, right? So that's the angle you're coming in with.
Yeah, really large companies. You're talking sort of 10, 15,000 people. Yeah. And that's just the UK bit of 150, maybe 200,000 globally. And I just think there's a bit of there's potential there around that tech that's coming down the road. I also think there's potential to say, well, actually, where do we resource that tech differently?
Right.
So we need to keep building these really big empires. And sometimes you do, right?
I guess what you're saying in another way is that, hey, building and hiring and hiring and hiring, there may be a different way around that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just trying to make a good example, but take compliance or risk management. You'll get into a never-ending argument with people about, but you can't outsource the risk and only people in your business can make the business decision. But you can maintain that accountability within the CISO function and still have external people. You know, if you can get external help for incidents or SOC analysis and making automated decisions around disconnecting devices from the network, you can definitely get external help that's dedicated to you that can assess your risk.
Got it.
Now, you still need to own it, right? You're accountable to the regulator or to the board.
Yeah, I mean,
but you don't have to. I think the traditional way is you say, I gotta have all of that in my empire.
Yeah.
And I just think some of that's got to start to shift around because it's really difficult to resource.
Yeah, but it's difficult to resource mainly because if you bring in someone new, sounds like what you're saying, it's like that specific person may have no idea how your organization works or even how the technology or tool works, like, for example. Versus if you go the opposite direction and bring someone from that business into that process, it may be easier to accomplish.
Yeah, and the risk tools that I've looked at in the last 6 months that I've been doing this, I think that's what's really made me think, instead of building a quite resource-intensive function internally, which is what I've always done and most people I know do, I'd actually buy some slightly better tech and I'd get some external dedicated resource in to help. And you get rid of some of the... You can go offshore. You don't have to go in London. So London, resource pricing is different, and you can have a much more targeted team in terms of doing engaging work rather than just churning through risk after risk after risk after risk.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the takeaway, at least for me, is like if you're able to go in and think about the challenge or the problem of trying, okay, I need to service this product or operationalize it. Maybe there's a different way of doing that.
Yeah. And I think that's what, to go back to your question on what would I do first thing I go into a company, the reason I'd look at that is because I think even if the answer you arrive at is the internal team's the right one, you would have forced yourself to work through, is it the right solution?
Yeah.
Is it the right structure of people? Because otherwise you could just bring in a new bit of kit or you could change a bit of kit. But I feel like, as a good example on a global transformation I did a few years ago, and there were 3 or 4 things that if we didn't do, all you'd really done is sort of rebadged everything globally. We hadn't fixed the core issues that got you there in the first place. And that's why I think if you just go back to basics, what does it look and feel like? What's the tech we're using? Who are the people we've got? And then take your time to learn and understand that.
Yeah.
And then make some decisions, right?
But then what is the, I guess, as you're thinking about those things, like, hey, there's this, that was one big learning. What about the other learnings? Like, what is like the most interesting technology you come about, for example?
Ooh.
Now
I meant to say dope, right?
Yeah, well, decide.
Clearly the answer. I don't know, actually. I think it almost pains me a little bit to say it, but I think it might be in the risk space.
No.
Because I've just spent, like, GRC is such a big part of cyber still, or information security. And I think there needs to be quite a heavy shift towards much more in the sort of pen testing, red teaming, tech space that's really find and fix problems. Going back to my point around don't just consume the logs, what's really causing it. I think for a long time we said we'll do all the GRC, which is really important, and we'll buy all the tools in the cyber, and then we'll just sort of put them into one CISO function. And what I'm seeing in the risk space is that you can buy some quite cool kit that will help you process large volumes of risk, calculate what the risk really is.
E.g.
Well, I don't know if I want to. Who would I name?
You gotta give a shout out to someone.
Yeah, ask me that again in a minute. I don't know who I'd shout out to, but I just think that it goes back to that point of it makes you think about how to do it differently.
Yeah,
I mean, what are the outcomes I could get? Because then I can free up some. It's not about getting rid of people internally. I'm not saying if you've got a team of 50 people, get rid of 40.
But maybe they're more focused.
Use their skills to really look at the big scary risks, to own the topics that you don't have time to own, rather than, compliance says we've got to get through 300 risks a month, so we better just rattle on with those.
So if somebody wants to be like you and also get a little more plugged in to the more venture startup-y scene, what should they do, especially because they're in London?
It's just taking the time, right? There's not a single person I reached out to or has reached out to me that doesn't want a coffee. Like, if you write to people and say, hey, I just read this thing on LinkedIn or saw you at InfoSec, I mean, everyone wants to talk. Everyone wants to have a coffee and share what they're up to. So I think it's just, but the difficulty is taking the time from your big full-time 70-hour-week job to go and just have a coffee, right? It's quite hard to justify. But if you take the time, people I mean, what are we, 3-4 meetings in now? Like,
Yeah,
and all we've done is drink coffee and drive around in a car, and it's been great. But people want to talk, right?
No, I mean, for sure. I think like, but when they're in the job, I guess they have to choose, right? Like they have to choose. Hey, I'm going to spend time or resources or whatever it is, dinner, something to create a relationship with maybe whether it's a founder or a venture capital firm or something like that. I guess how would you recommend someone doing that?
It's literally just reaching out. If you don't put yourself out there and say, hey, I like the look of this, I'm interested in that. And if you were a CISO in a big company. They've got a CISO, they're spending money on you, you've got, probably a few thousand users, you've already got the gift of, 40 IT providers? And you can ring any one of them, right? And say, hey, I want to go to dinner, or I want to know more about this. And, the chap we were just talking to before who works at a reseller, you ring him up and he'll want to talk about this. He'll know 5 people he can get.
But you believe that this has helped you significantly?
Oh, massively. If the one thing, if I could go back and change over the last 4 or 5 years in my CISO role, would be carving out almost weekly, if not, certainly monthly, but if not weekly, time to connect with the industry, just to understand, because you get very ingrained in, we've got this problem, we've got these people, let's just use those people to fix it.
Or, hey, we have a new problem or a new thing on a project, just go in and solve that.
Just firefighting, rather than really, and people talk about strategy, right? You can sit back and do all strategic thinking, but just getting out and talking, and not just talking to, talking through vendors and cyber companies, then you get to meet some great CISOs. Right? And some people with some great ideas who are doing it differently, and then you learn from them. Rather than just, this week I fixed 4 problems, but I might not fix them the best way.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that this has been an opportunity for other people to also learn from what you're doing, right? Because it's like, hey, if they go out and put themselves out there, then the community gets bigger, right?
Yeah, 100%. And again, everyone in this space just wants to talk, right? So if you, again, there's not a CISO I've written to and said,
not talk as in like a monologue, right? Like discuss is what he
is a
means.
better word. Discuss is a better word.
We want an opportunity to talk to each other.
But people just want to connect, right? So if you write to a CISO and say, hey, I was over at this place and I had this problem and fancy a coffee. Again, I'm yet to find one. It might take 6 months where they've got time, but they will find time for it.
Yeah, I don't know, fair. I mean, it's fair. So tell me, what is your biggest pet peeve in cybersecurity?
Oh, it might be the skills gap, which is a controversial one because you've got people who are really passionate that it exists. I mean, you've been on LinkedIn this week, right? You would have seen something about it.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think that there is, or do you think there isn't?
I think a bit of both. I feel like I'm sitting on the fence. I think there's an industry. There definitely are certain roles where there's real gaps.
Yeah.
And I think if you believe the stats, we're 3 million vacant roles, etc. But I don't see it. I don't really see it talking to people. Now I know there are people having a hard time getting jobs. Don't get me wrong. But I think, and I know there are.
But I don't think. But what you're saying is that just because you have a hard time getting a job doesn't mean that there's a skill gap.
Yeah, and I think what frustrates me about the skill gap is that to some degree, we proliferate that skill gap by saying, if you haven't been in a risk team for 5 years, if you haven't got experience with this specific tool, quite a lot of jobs, if you haven't got a degree or a cyber degree, and some even a master's. I did a talk at a conference, must have been May time, and one of the things I shared there, and I like to use this example all the time, is I just go very quickly before I go on the conference, I just go on 5 job sites.
Yeah.
It could be companies that I know or just a LinkedIn job search.
Right.
And you take 5 random jobs and I won't be able to get them. So I got 15, 16 years of experience in cyber. I've been a regulated CISO. I've done global transformations in the hundreds of millions. And I look at these job specs and I would not even get shortlisted because I haven't got one of them wanted a master's in cybersecurity. And if you've got to just,
who has a master's in cyber?
Yeah, and if you do you really want to spend it doing risk management?
Yeah, I mean, usually you'll be a researcher if you're at that level. Yeah,
or doing something really cool in a in a vendor and back end. So,
but then do you think that it's basically your hot take is that?
I think that there are plenty of people with the skills.
Yeah,
we just don't. We create a barrier that enables that means those skills can't come in.
Yeah.
So you could have been in audit, and you've got great understanding of IT and cyber.
It goes back to what you were saying before, right? If like you might be on the business side, but what if we bring that person and teach them a bit on the cyber side?
All those transferable skills. So for every single job, I think if you go down the job spec and you go, 80% of that can come from transferable skills.
Yeah.
And you can teach cyber. And if they've got the right soft skills and the values for the company and the team, then I would always personally, I say that I'd rather take someone with 80% values and fit and 20% cyber, and because we can teach them cyber. If they're the best cyber person you've ever met, but they just don't fit the team or the company, then...
Well, sometimes this is not about, I mean, you're not hiring them to be a pen tester, right? You're hiring them for, you know, operating, understanding, looking through, thinking the job, right? You're not necessarily having them go in and write even code, right? They might not have to be an engineer, for example, in every role, right?
Yeah, and I think that is one of the challenges of big enterprises is setting expectations of, I've seen it firsthand where people come from, pen testing is a great example. You come from a pen testing career, done loads of great stuff, then a big enterprise says, I've got some pen testing work, come and work for us.
Yeah.
And then actually what you end up doing is being the facilitator or the broker between the business and the pen testing company they use. And you're just quite frustrated because you can't get your hands on the tools anymore. You can't do the actual pen test. We're paying someone else to do that pen test. And I think that's a great example of the skills gap, is that person's got the skills. It's just we've created a barrier that says we need people that have actually done it before they can come and do that role. Because in reality, we don't. We need someone with good cyber knowledge, someone who's brilliant at understanding the business apps and where the risk is and what we're going to pen test this year, and being a sort of translator and coordinator. But you don't necessarily, sometimes you do, but you don't necessarily have to have ever done a pen test. And there's 100 arguments against this, right?
Well, no, I mean, it's like, but not every single person that's in your cybersecurity team has to have done a pen test before themselves, which I completely agree with, actually. Like, for example, the technology that we've built, I don't think it requires someone overly technical. I think they need to know computer concepts, but their job is to manage and operate and control things. They don't have to go into the nitty gritty and figure out, oh, how does the SSL decryption work? And how do you do this? How do you, I mean, that was the way it was 20 years ago. I think the world has changed, that we need to make the user experience and interface better and easier so that anyone can go in and do that. So it's not requiring, like, you need a problem solver, not necessarily like a super duper technical person to configure and learn your query language, for example.
Yeah, I think education awareness is a little bit like that. So I tend to equate it to the banks. If you think about your bank, they would have said to you over the years, don't move money between accounts because we never asked you to. Don't give your PIN number to anyone, and make sure, I don't know, we'll always call you from this number and authenticate with a PIN. Like, they've taught you 3, maybe 4 things that are ingrained now. And you know that if you deviate from that, you might have a problem.
You might have a risk.
And I just think if cyber could get to that point with education and awareness, and it's complicated, right? But if you could get to the point for the users where you go, we will never ask you to click on a link. Which we do all the time, by the way. So we tell you not to click on them.
But the business process
requires you to click on them. We'll never ask you for your password unless we're rolling out new laptops, in which case we might ask you for your password that day. But if you could get to those 3 or 4 things, the user shouldn't have to learn what a secure URL is, how to tell if it's a malicious link, was I expecting the email, etc. All skills that we have to teach people because you don't want to be full foul of phishing. But at the same time, I think if you just, I like the idea of where the banks are, which is if you don't ever do this, we'll keep you safe. And if we could get to the point where our users, where we go, look, just don't click on links, don't give away your password, don't log in from cafes or whatever the rules are, then they're going to be safe. It just needs that simplification.
No, fair. I mean, it's an interesting transition. Like, there's lots of transitions. I mean, one of the transitions that I've even seen is this introduction of a field CISO role. I'm very curious to hear what you think of that.
I'm not sure I know where they are. What would your description of a field CISO be? I'll tell you mine.
I have too many hot takes about it, but what I've seen is it's somebody who is operating externally facing, where they're attempting to create cachet between a vendor and a customer and speak the same language.
Yeah, that's pretty much my experience. I mean, the other take on it I've seen is sort of like a consultancy piece where they're saying we've got like a bench of CISOs. They call them field CISOs, and then you can sort of dip in and out. But still bridging that gap. I think there's a space for field CISOs. I think perhaps be a bit more transparent about what they really are.
Sales engineer.
But
a very, very good engineer at the company, or a very, very good cybersecurity expert at the company, right?
But I do think it's a difficult one for vendors, because I personally think when I'm looking at a vendor and you go and look at their website, you can see very quickly who the founders are, who the leadership team are. And I've done some pretty big deals over the years in the tens of millions where the company can't send their CISO. And you think, well, we're going to give you tens of millions in business, and maybe give you all of our cybersecurity, and you guys haven't got a CISO internally you can send.
Interesting.
And I think that potentially drives that need for field CISOs, because there's an expectation from enterprises that surely you're going to send us someone with a CISO title.
Yeah.
And so the company's got no
But
choice.
that's actually a mismatch, right? You're kind of ordering apples and you're getting bananas instead. Like, I mean, I get it. Because I have friends that go into those roles and stuff like that, but I'm like, most of the people I work with that I talk to, like for example yourself, like your name is on the line when you go to work every day.
Yeah.
Which is that's the true nature of a CISO. That's why I thought I would ask you what you thought.
Yeah.
Because there's always a lot of differences on the other side in California. Because technically speaking, and I guess that's the next question for you, is how different do you think it is here in the UK and the US?
I mean, I don't have any experience of the US, but my perception,
Perception.
an educated perception, is who would be a CISO in the US. It looks so hard. I mean, it's hard here, right?
He's like, no, it's really hard here. Make sure I get my paycheck.
It's hard, but the US just looks really hard. The employment law is different, the regulation.
Yeah, I mean, that will employment.
Yeah.
You can get fired anytime. But I mean, I think there's a few things like, Fricky, he's a CISO at CNB. He was like, just make sure you get your like exit clauses inside, make sure you're named as on the insurance and so on and so forth. So there's things that people say to do, but I guess,
I mean, anytime you need insurance to do your job, like in an office, all I do is sit in an office and drink tea. You need insurance to exist, right? So it's a different
you have to be on the actual insurance as a named insuree, right? You're an officer of the company.
Yeah, no. So I think it's a very, very different environment. And I got a few sort of friends and colleagues over the years who are based in the US, and the market feels very different as well. Like,
I think when you say market, what part?
I just mean the job market for CISO. Sorry, like it feels very. I think here it's a very long churn to get a job. People start. I mean, notice periods alone are going to be 6 to 12 months for most CISOs. Wow. So that life cycle, if you were in a role and you're looking for, not true for everyone, but I think for CISOs in sort of banks and insurance companies, you're probably looking end to end a 9 to 12 month hiring period.
Yeah.
From when you decide you want to start looking to then when there's a job available, to the multiple interviews, right through to the assessment. Then you turn up at this company after your 6 months.
Things go a little slowly here, is what I'm hearing.
Traditional.
Very traditional people here.
Yeah. Whereas I can speak to friends and colleagues in the US, and it's like we only spoke 2 weeks ago, and they've changed jobs. So how did that happen?
So I think things move a little faster over there.
Definitely.
Fast-paced life here in California.
that must create good opportunity for you guys, right? In terms of that movement helps, right? When people.
I think it does. I do think that there's like a lot of similarities. There's definitely trends, right? Like, I mean, there is an element of, sort of slowness to this in the UK and Europe in general. But I don't think the slowness comes from anything more than it actually stems from trusted relationships, right? If you're going into a new org, and especially at where you're at, right, where it's 10,000 people, I can totally imagine it taking 6 months to go in and get your next gig. I totally imagine it.
Easily.
Like 9 months, that's like normal. But I mean, the things are actually the same here and there, but then there's actually like there's just a bit more of an acceptance towards it, right? Like, for example, culturally, it's like, yeah, you could get fired tomorrow.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's normal.
Difficult to get used to.
Yeah. But then it never really happens, right? Like, I mean, the reality is that if you get a notice period, you will get a notice period. It's just you get that after you're fired.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's
like, hi, you're out. And then, by the way, you have a 6 months of severance or something like that.
That's not so bad.
So
do you see much in the fractional space now? Because that's become really.
I've seen that as well. There's definitely a lot. I mean, the thing is, if I'm a fractional CISO, it's like I'm going to help companies that cannot hire their own CISO.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's less around, hey, let me build tools and technology. It's more about I need to talk to someone and have a consultant on board. But what I have seen is that like usually they'll still have like an IT leader or something like that at the company that's running the actual operations of everything. but this person is adding their kind of thought process or technology or something like that there, because these are people that usually have a very deep-rooted knowledge in cyber. They're coming in and then they're helping like you are. You could be, for example, but I definitely think that there is like pros and cons, right? You're essentially your own business owner then.
Yeah, if you get it right, yeah. And I think there's a space for it because, as you said, it's that consultancy. It's almost like a pause between, so we know that person just left, and we know we need a new person.
Yeah.
But do we need exactly the same? Like, what do we actually need?
Exactly. So that's one trend for sure. The field CISO is another one. I mean, I think these are just like, I am a CISO. I don't want to do the same thing anymore. Let me go to other things as well. But I think the question really for you, at the end is like, hey, if you wanted someone to be in your position with it, because Allianz is a huge company, what would you say to them?
I'd say just learn how to get things done. Like being a CISO,
get shit done.
Frankly, this is the expression. Like you just need to be able to get stuff done. I haven't done anything in particular over the last 15 years that's different to anyone else.
Yeah.
I've just become very good at, so that's a problem.
We
can get that fixed. And the quicker we can fix it, the better the recognition will be for that. And then honoring getting it done. If you say you're going to get it done,
make sure.
Get it done. Because if you say you're going to get it done, don't get it done, pretty much game over. So I think it's just that commitment. It's that ability to find and solve problems.
I love that, man. Well, dude, thank you so much for coming in today. This was like really fun, really amazing being here in London.
Yeah, we're in traffic now.
Every time I come here, we can't not meet. But thank you again, and
my pleasure.
Catch you super soon.
Yeah, I get to keep this.
Yes. Well, once we become a customer. Take care. Thank you.